Hail my Taco Legion and welcome back to my channel. Today we will be doing part 2 of reading DBD profiles so you don't have to. Now, the original plan was to read one profile per video and alternate between survivor and killer, but the profiles were shorter than I expected, so I decided to just read 8 characters per video, 4 survivors and 4 killers. With that said, let's get on to the next 8. We'll be starting with Miss Nia Carlson. Nia grew up in the small town of Sjöö in Sweden. She had a happy childhood even though her mom and dad worked hard. As the opportunity to move to the US became a reality, she started acting out. Nia was forced to leave her friends and life behind. Nia shied away from what her parents considered normal. Instead, she took refuge in skate parks, and her tag, Matchsticks, was seen more or less all over her new hometown. Nia made a sport out of tagging government buildings, avoiding the fuzz and any other danger with her nimble cat-like abilities. Finally, Nia's parents became used to her disappearing for a few days on end. She may have gone too far when her friends dared her to tag the old Crotus Pen Asylum one moonless night, as she was never seen again. Next is William Bill Overbeck. It took 2 tours in Vietnam, a handful of medals, a knee full of shrapnel, and an honorable discharge to get William Bill Overbeck to stop fighting and try to live a peaceful life. He hated it. After decades spent drifting aimlessly through dead-end jobs, Bill went in for a routine surgery and woke up to find the world he knew was gone. A plague was turning normal people into mindless killing machines. Naturally, the first thing he did was fight his way home and put on his uniform. Making his way through rural ghost towns and pitch-black forests, he found other survivors, and together they fled from the infected hordes. In the end, Bill sacrificed himself to ensure their safety. His body was never found. Bill was left for dead. No one knows that he still has the only thing he ever wanted, an enemy to fight. Next is David King. The single child of a wealthy family, David King seemed destined for greatness. While growing up in Manchester, he demonstrated serious potential in both sports and academics, and with his family connections, all doors were open to him. He could have succeeded at anything if it weren't for his combative nature. David lived for the adrenaline rush of a good fight and would go out of his way to get into one. His robustness and athletic abilities led him to rugby, where he could cut loose and really cause a ruckus. King excelled and gained a reputation as a promising, if somewhat reckless, rookie. His meteoric rise came to an abrupt end when he lost his temper and assaulted a referee, earning himself a lifetime ban from the league and cutting short what most people assumed was going to be a long and successful career. King was unconcerned. Money was no issue, so he took it as an early retirement and focused on other fun things to do. Free from the constraints of a career and enabled by the wealth of his family, David King spent most of his time at the pub, drinking, watching games, and getting into fights. Some might say he was wasting his life away. Not many people knew that he was an occasional debt collector, or that he fought in clandestine, bare-knuckle fight clubs. When David King stopped showing up at the pub, the few friends he still had were not surprised. They figured he had finally picked a fight with someone stronger than he was. In a way, they were right. Then we got Miss Laurie Strode. You never know what really matters in life until you've realized it might end soon. Laurie is one of those who just wants a quiet life in the suburbs, hanging out with friends, family, and maybe go on a date or two. Laurie is a typical teenager. You could pass her on the street and not think twice. She does her homework and is liked by her friends, teachers, and family. A simple night of babysitting turns into something that will forever change the course of her young life. A knife swishing through the air, screams from afar, noises that play tricks with her mind. But not Laurie. She's made of something stronger, something that won't give up. And there you have the next 4 survivors, and we are going over to the Huntress for the killers. As soon as Anna was able to walk, Her mother started teaching her how to survive a harsh, solitary life in the northern woods. Living in such an extremely remote and dangerous area required skill and resilience. When sunlight became too dim for productive activities, they would take refuge in their house, a sturdy old cabin constructed to resist the toughest winters. Close to the hearth's warmth, Anna would rest in her mother's arms, surrounded by the few wooden toys and masks she had crafted for her. Drifting off to sleep with stories and lullabies, she dreamt happy dreams, ignorant of the events that would soon change everything. Anna and her mother were stalking a great elk through the woods. They knew it was dangerous prey, but it had been a particularly difficult winter, and they were almost out of food. The specter of starvation frightened them more than any forest creature. Without warning, the elk reared, bellowed, and charged at Anna. She was paralyzed with fear as the whole world seemed to shake under the immense beast's pounding hooves. The elk was close enough for Anna to see the murderous fury in his eyes when her mother threw herself in its path, axe in hand. A blood-curdling scream escaped from her lips as the elk impaled her upon its antlers and hoisted her into the air. With all her strength, she brought her axe down on its head again and again while it tried to shake her loose. With a sickening crack, the antlers snapped, and Anna's mother was free. The beast collapsed. Anna was too small to move her mother's broken body, so she sat with her in the clearing where she had fallen. To distract her from the dying elk's cries, Anna's mother held her and hummed her favorite lullaby. They stayed like that, the huntress and the elk getting quieter and colder, until Anna was alone in the silent forest. Eventually she stood up and started the long walk back home. Still a child, she knew just enough about life in the frozen forest to survive. She followed her instincts and became one with the wild. She got older and stronger and practiced her hunt. As she grew into a dangerous predator, her humanity became a half-remembered dream. She widened her territory and lived off her hunts. She worked her way up through squirrels and hares and mink and foxes. Eventually she grew tired of them and hunted more dangerous animals like wolves and bears. When unsuspecting travelers came through her woods, she discovered her new favorite prey, humans. Unlucky souls who strayed into her territory were slaughtered like any other animal. She liked to collect their tools and colorful garments, and especially toys when they were little ones. But she could never bring herself to kill the little girls. Girls she would take back to her house, deep in the woods. They were precious, and looking at them woke up something deep in her heart. She craved the closeness of a loved one, a child of her own. Among the pillaged wooden toys, dolls, and storybooks she couldn't read, the girls would be tied by the neck with a rough and chafing rope fastened firmly to the wall. She couldn't let them wander off, or they would surely die outside. Every time, the girls would waste away and die of cold or starvation or sickness. Every time, it plunged Anna deeper into pain and sorrow and madness. She was compelled to try again, and started raiding the nearest villages to slaughter families and kidnap their daughters. She wore one of the animal masks her mother crafted for her so many years earlier to try to calm the frightened children. Villagers spread the legend of a half-beast lurking in Red Forest, the huntress, who killed men and ate little girls. War eventually came to the forest. German soldiers began to pass through, on the march to attack the collapsing Russian Empire. During these dark times, there were no more travelers. The villagers had abandoned their homes, and no more little ones to be found, only soldiers. Many of them were found with violent axe wounds. Whole groups disappeared mysteriously. Once the war was over, the rumors of the huntress disappeared with it, engulfed by the Red Forest. I think that's the longest one we've had so far. And then you've got the shape. Some humans are simply bad seeds, seeds infused with a distilled and pure form of evil. Michael Myers is one of those seeds. He had no issues with causing the pain of others. Instead, it was exactly what he sought. But even life can be tough on those with minds filled with terror. The difference is just how one goes about to solve those problems. For Michael, he had to kill to find some inner peace. As he took his sister's life, the police found a silent boy dressed as a clown at the scene. When one stumbles upon a growing fire, one does not pour gasoline on it. But this was an action taken by officials that had no idea how it would shape this demon in the boy's body. Sending Michael to a mental institution was a feeble attempt to save the child. Unsuccessful therapy and nightly screams just made him even more introvert and deranged. People hoped that Michael Myers would end up a parenthesis, soon to be forgotten and buried. A failure that soon were to rot away. But then, he escaped. Then you've got the Hag. Lisa Sherwood grew up in a quiet town. The people of the village were kind, and the elders helped settle their disputes and keep the old traditions alive. Lisa was particularly fond of the charms they taught her to draw for safety and good fortune. One night, as she was walking home through the woods, a terrible storm struck without warning. In the slick, wet darkness, she lost her footing and struck her head. Slipping in and out of consciousness, she watched dark shapes approach between the trees. Soon they were close enough for her to make out their evil, hungry grins. They kept her chained to the wall in a flooded cellar. Through the gloom, she could see others, whose open wounds swarmed with flies. They did not survive long once the cannibals began carving bites from their bodies with their rusted blades. But somehow, Lisa persisted. Starved and mutilated, her gaunt arms became loose in their shackles. She pulled, and the metal tore through skin and muscle until she was free. Her flesh oozed vicious yellow pus, and bones were visible beneath gangrenous wounds. She could go no further. Delirious, she thought of home. She thought of the elders. She traced the symbols they had taught her. A dark hunger stirred inside her. It yearned for blood. She chose vengeance. The police search eventually brought them to the old house in the swamp. Its inhabitants had been dismembered and devoured. The elders' charms were scrawled in blood on the floor. Lisa's body was never found. And finally, we have the doctor. Showing exceptional aptitude in psychology, Herman was handpicked for special training in an advanced neuroscience program located in a secret black site facility in Illinois known as the Leroy Memorial Institute, really a front for the CIA. This is where Herman met Dr. Otto Stamper, where under his guidance, Herman began to use strange and ever-increasingly vicious methods to extract information from prisoners sent to the Institute, which was also a covert prison and re-education center for whoever was the USA's current nemesis. His liberal use of violent electroshock therapy revealed dramatic results, and several threats to national security were uncovered. Over the years, Herman became known as the Doctor, and no one ever questioned if he even held a medical certificate, or even what happened to the prisoners after they had given up their information. It was only after the Leroy Memorial Institute went silent for a week that the true horror was finally discovered. The personnel, patients, and prisoners were all found dead, with all types of head trauma. All personnel and prisoners' bodies were accounted for, including Dr. Otto Stamper, but no sign of Herman the Doctor Carter. And there we have the next 8 survivors and killers of Dead by Daylight. I will see you in the next episode of Reading DBD Profiles so you don't have to.